The first time the Galactic Council ever held an emergency session over a single planet, it was not because of a supernova. It was not because of a rogue black hole swallowing a populated star system. It was not even because the Vreth Collective had, for the 14th time, accidentally detonated a moon. No, it was because of Earth. Specifically, it was because of what a species called humans had just done to a Kavaran battle carrier in Sector 9. Ambassador Solka Dren of the Myvari Dominion entered the Grand Chamber of the Eternal Assembly with the particular walk of someone who had not slept in 40 hours and was surviving entirely on a beverage that, by Myvari biological standards, should have killed him twice already. He called it motivation. His aide called it a war crime against the body. Either way, he sat down, placed both of his upper limbs flat on the crystalline council table, and stared at the holographic display floating in the center of the room. The display showed what was left of the Kavaran battle carrier. Left was generous. Debris field was more accurate. High Arbiter Yuno Peth, the oldest living Theluvian in recorded history and a being who had presided over 47 galactic conflicts without once raising her voice, cleared her secondary throat and addressed the assembly. "What you are observing," she said, with the practiced calm of someone who was absolutely not calm, is the remains of the INV Kavaran throne, a carrier-class warship, 14 decks, a complement of 912 crew members, armed with the Grethian pulse array which, as you all know, has the theoretical capability of splitting a small moon. She paused. It was destroyed in 11 minutes. The chamber went very, very quiet. Ambassador Dren rubbed the bridge of what passed for his nose on a Myvari face. 12 eyes across the room blinked at different intervals. Someone from the Orlith delegation made a sound that translated loosely as "that is deeply not good." "By humans," Yuno Peth continued, because apparently she felt it was important to make everything worse. The Kavoran representative, a towering creature named Bauth Solrek, whose species had been the dominant military power in the Outer Ring for 600 years, was doing something unprecedented. He was sitting very still and staring at the floor. Bauth Solrek's species did not, as a cultural rule, display vulnerability in public. They also did not, as a cultural rule, suffer defeats. They were not adjusting well to either experience. Ambassador Solrek, the High Arbiter, said, not unkindly, "Would you like to explain the context of the engagement?" Bauth Solrek looked up slowly. His eyes, which were the deep amber color of something that had survived a great deal and was not interested in surviving much more today, settled on the holographic debris cloud. "We received intelligence," he said, "that a human trading vessel had been operating within the disputed corridor of Sector 9 without filing the appropriate territorial acknowledgement forms." Someone in the back of the chamber sneezed, and it was the loudest sound in the room. "Standard procedure," Bauth Solrek continued, "was to deploy one carrier, a show of force, a formal demand for acknowledgement of Kavaran sovereignty. The vessel would comply. The vessel would retreat. This has been done 417 times across 42 species in the last 2 centuries. Not once has it failed." He stopped. Yuno Peth waited. "The human vessel," Bauth Solrek said slowly, "did not retreat." Ambassador Dren poured himself another drink from a flask he kept hidden inside his formal robes. He felt no shame about this. "The human vessel," Bauth Solrek said, "hailed us. The captain, a female of the species, identified herself as one Petra Volkov. She asked us, and I am reading directly from the translated transcript, quote, whether we were absolutely sure we wanted to do this today, because she had been awake for 22 hours and her coffee had gone cold and she was not, quote, in the mood." The Orlith delegate made that sound again. This time several others joined in. "We did not," Bauth Solrek said, "take this as a credible threat." There was a long silence. "The vessel then proceeded to deploy what our analysts initially identified as mining charges," he said. "Standard commercial grade. We calculated correctly that they lacked the yield to significantly damage our hull plating. What we did not calculate was that the human captain had arranged them in a specific geometric pattern around our ship during what we believed was her retreat." He touched the holographic display and brought up a separate feed. It was a recording from a Kavoran external sensor. It showed a battered, heavily modified freighter moving in what appeared to be erratic, evasive patterns around the carrier. What it was actually doing, to any observer watching carefully, was drawing a very specific net. "She was not retreating," Bauth Solrek said. "She was reloading." A human freighter, crewed by 7 people, had used the Kavoran carrier's own weapons fire, the predictive targeting algorithms, and what Petra Volkov had apparently described in her post-action report as "a lot of math I did on a napkin." to detonate her own mining charges in a cascading sequence that fed directly into the carrier's exhaust manifolds at the precise moment of overload cycling. 912 crew members, Both Solrek said. He was not angry anymore. He was something past anger, in a quieter country. Evacuated in time, we are not. We do not pursue the killing of civilians even in a clear military victory over. I say this so the record reflects accurately. He looked around the room. We lost the ship. We did not lose the crew. The humans, they targeted the ship. They let the pods go. The chamber was silent for a different reason now. Unopeth folded her primary hands together. The reason for this emergency session, she said, is not the loss of the Kavoran vessel. It is what this incident represents in context with 12 previous incidents over the last 8 years. A new holographic display appeared. It showed a star map with small red markers. There were, Ambassador Dren counted quickly, 19 of them. 19 separate engagements, the High Arbiter said, involving human vessels, human crews, or human installations, in which a significantly superior force engaged a human target and the human target, one, she said the last word the way you say a word when it has not stopped being surprising no matter how many times you say it. In the majority of cases, she continued, the humans were outgunned by a factor of no less than 4 to 1. In 3 cases, the ratio exceeded 12 to 1. In one case, a single human individual disabled a Prothean automated weapons platform with a tool described in his own words as, quote, a wrench and some tape. Ambassador Dren finished his drink. We are not here, Unopeth said very carefully, to discuss whether humans are dangerous. That question has been answered. We are here because the Vorthan Empire has just filed a formal declaration of intent to subjugate the Sol system within the next cycle, and every single government in this chamber knows that if the Vorthans go to war with Earth, it will not end with the subjugation of the Sol system. She looked around the room. It will end with the subjugation of whoever the Vorthans are using as allies, and then, eventually, with whatever is left of the Vorthans, and then with whatever is left of the rest of us standing too close when the humans decide what to do next. Both Solrek, conqueror of 17 systems, veteran of 4 galactic wars, nodded once. We, he said, with the tremendous dignity of a person swallowing an enormous amount of pride, would like to formally request that the Council consider an intervention, on behalf of the Vorthans, before the Vorthans do something that causes a problem for everyone. Ambassador Dren put his flask away, leaned forward, looked at the red markers on the star map. So what you're saying, he said slowly, is that you want us to protect the Vorthans from the humans, by asking the humans to please not destroy them. Yes, Both Solrek said. Dren looked at the debris field that had been a carrier. And who, he asked, exactly is going to deliver that message? The silence that followed was the sound of 14 galactic ambassadors not volunteering. It took the Galactic Council 3 full days to find someone willing to go to Earth. 3 days. For context, it had taken them only 6 hours to negotiate the Treaty of Yelvern, which had ended a war spanning 4 star systems and involved 17 separate species. It had taken them 9 hours to resolve the Prothean border crisis, during which 2 fleets had been actively shooting at each other the entire time. It had taken them 40 minutes to agree on lunch, but finding a volunteer to walk onto a human space station and say politely, "Excuse me, could you possibly not destroy the Vorthans?" turned out to be, as Ambassador Dren later described it, a thing that nobody wanted to do even a little bit. The job eventually fell to a diplomat named Caro Ven. Caro Ven was Silurian. He was approximately the height of a human adult male, blue-gray in complexion, possessed of 4 fingers on each hand, 2 on each side like a biological parenthesis, and was considered by his peers to be the single most unflappable individual currently serving in the diplomatic corps. He had once, during a hostage negotiation with the Grath pirates, fallen asleep mid-session. When he woke up, the hostages were free and the pirates had signed 3 separate trade agreements. Nobody was entirely sure what had happened. Caro Ven said he had been thinking, not sleeping. Nobody believed him. He accepted the Earth assignment with the particular expression of a person who understood exactly what was being asked of him and was choosing, deliberately and consciously, not to think about it too hard. His briefing packet was enormous. Human history, condensed into 1,400 pages, was not, it turned out, a document that inspired confidence. Page 1 covered the period during which humans had believed the planet was flat. By page 3 they had invented fire. By page 40 they were building rockets. By page 90 they had split the atom and in the same 50-year period also produced something called jazz and something else called the internet, neither of which the briefing packet was able to fully explain in terms that translated clearly into Silurian. On page 347, there was a section titled, "In the original Council Analyst's Notes, Do not engage on the topic of sports." The section explained why. Caro Van read it twice. He decided he would not engage on the topic of sports. The station he was traveling to was called Meridian 7. It sat at the edge of human-controlled space, specifically at the point where human-controlled space technically began to bleed into what the Vorthans considered a transit corridor, which was what had started this entire problem. Meridian 7 was a trading post, a refueling hub, a minor administrative center, and, according to his briefing packet, home to a bar called the Outer Rim Tap that had been cited 7 times by passing my very health inspectors and remained defiantly open on the grounds that my very health standards did not apply to human facilities, a position that was technically correct and had driven the inspectors somewhat to the edge. Caro Vane arrived at Meridian 7 on a Silurian diplomatic shuttle, which he had specifically chosen because it was small, unarmed, and painted in the traditional Silurian diplomatic colors of pale gold and white, which across most of the galaxy signified peaceful intent and non-aggression. The human docking officer who cleared him in said, "Nice paint job," which Caro Vane took as a good sign. The station itself was busy, was one word for it. Loud was another. It had that specific energy of a place that operated at full capacity and had no intention of ever operating at less. There were humans moving in every direction with the particular purposeful speed of beings who had somewhere to be and considered standing still a personal failure. There were a few other species too, traders mostly. But they had collectively arranged themselves in the portions of the station that were slightly less kinetic, the way small fish arranged themselves near the edges of a current. Caro Vane had been told to ask for Commander Yael Okafor. Commander Okafor ran Meridian 7. She was, by the reports, experienced, direct, not easily impressed, and currently, according to his briefing packet's most recent update, deeply annoyed about something involving a supply manifest and 3 crates of something called protein bars that had been mislabeled as structural components. He found her in the administrative hub. She was a human woman of medium height with close-cropped hair and the expression of someone who had been having a day for approximately 5 days in a row. She looked at Caro Vane, then at his diplomatic credentials, then back at him. "Galactic Council," she said. "Diplomatic envoy." She said it the way you read words aloud when you want to make sure you are reading them correctly and are not certain you are. "Yes," Caro Vane said. "Here," she said, "on my station." "Yes. For what?" Caro Vane had practiced this speech for 9 hours on the shuttle. He had 17 different versions of it, calibrated for tone, for audience, for context. He had one version designed to appeal to human logic, one designed to appeal to human emotion, one designed to be extremely brief in case the human he was talking to was impatient. He had notes in his jacket pocket. He had, in a folder on his datapad, 3 backup arguments and 2 complimentary statements about human culture he had prepared in case he needed to build rapport quickly. What he said was, the Galactic Council would like to formally request that the Sol system not go to war with the Vorthan Empire. Yael Okafor looked at him for a long moment. "That's funny," she said, "because we were going to say the same thing to the Vorthans." Caro Vane blinked. "I'm sorry? We sent a diplomatic packet to the Vorthan High Command 8 days ago," she said, turning and walking toward a side office, gesturing for him to follow in the way humans did when they were continuing a conversation while also doing 6 other things. "Told them we had no interest in escalation, that the corridor dispute was a navigational misunderstanding, and that we were open to a formal boundary negotiation." Caro Vane followed her, feeling something shift in his understanding of the situation. "And their response? They sent a fleet." She pulled up a display on the office wall. It showed a Vorthan military formation, 23 vessels, sitting approximately 4 light hours from the outer edge of human sensor range. "They're not moving," she said, "but they're not leaving, and every time we hail them, we get a pre-recorded message about the sacred rights of Vorthan territorial sovereignty." She looked at him, which is a very long way of saying they haven't decided yet. Caro Vane sat down without being invited to, because his legs had made an executive decision. "The Council," he said slowly, "was under the impression that the humans, that you were the ones preparing for conflict. Were we? The incident with the Kavoran carrier." Yael Okafor's expression did something complicated. "The Kavoran carrier that blockaded a civilian freighter operating in open space and demanded it stop and pay a sovereignty tax to a government it wasn't a citizen of. From the Kavoran perspective, the corridor. From our perspective, Petra Volkov was doing her job and someone pointed a 14-deck warship at her. She folded her arms. She gave them a warning. They didn't take it. She went home. Nobody died. Caro Venn thought about the debris field that had been a 900 crew carrier and felt a strong urge to point out that one of those facts was doing a lot of heavy lifting. He did not say this. Here is what I need you to understand, Yael Okafor said, and she sat down across from him, and she spoke the way people speak when they have said something many times and not been heard. We are not aggressive. We are not expansionist. We do not want Vorthan territory or Kavaran territory or anyone else's territory. We want to move through open space, trade with our neighbors, and be left alone. Every single conflict, every single engagement in the last 8 years, every one of your 19 red markers on whatever star map your council is staring at, was initiated by someone else. We finished them. That's different. Caro Venn was quiet for a moment. Outside the office, the station hummed and moved and did what stations do. The council is afraid. He said finally that if the Vorthans engage and lose, which is now the primary projected outcome, the aftermath will be significant. Significant, she repeated. There is some concern, he said very carefully, about how humans respond to direct military aggression against civilian targets. Historically speaking, Yael Okafor looked at him steadily. You read our history. 1,400 pages of it. Then you know, she said, what we do when someone pushes us hard enough. He did know. He had read about it. He had not entirely believed it when he read it, because the species that had produced jazz and the internet and a sport involving throwing a leather sphere between people also had, in its earlier centuries, demonstrated a capacity for total industrial warfare that had impressed analysts across the galaxy in the specific way that things impress you when you would very much prefer not to be impressed by them. Tell the council, Yael Okafor said, that we don't want a war. Tell the Vorthans the same thing. If they pull their fleet back, we'll sit down at a table and we will talk for as long as it takes to sort out the corridor. We are genuinely, sincerely offering that. She leaned forward slightly. But tell them this too. If they fire on a human station, if they touch one civilian transport, if they give us the kind of reason we need to stop being patient, then whatever happens next is not going to be something a council emergency session fixes. Not because we want that, but because we are very, very good at it, and once it starts, the people making the decisions are not the people in rooms like this one. Caro Venn thought about Petra Volkov and her cold coffee and her napkin full of math and the debris cloud that used to be a carrier. He thought about 19 red markers. He thought about 1,400 pages. I will, he said, convey this exactly. He stood, gathered himself, and extended his hand the way his briefing packet said humans did when they meant something sincerely. Yael Okafor shook it. One more thing, he said. Yes? The bar on level 3. The outer rim tap. The packet mentioned it. Is it as? It's fine, she said, just don't ask about the health inspection thing. Caro Venn went to the bar. He ordered something called a double espresso on the advice of the human behind the counter who told him it would change his life. It did not change his life. It did, however, make the shuttle ride back to the council chambers considerably more animated. His report was 40 pages long. The summary was 2 sentences. They don't want war. Make sure the Vorthans know that this is a kindness, not a weakness. The Vorthan fleet withdrew 6 days later. Nobody held a parade. Nobody made speeches. The corridor dispute went to formal negotiation and was resolved in 3 months by a committee that included, notably, Petra Volkov as a civilian consultant, a choice that had initially alarmed the Kavaran representative before he remembered, practically, that it was better to have her working on paperwork than working on anything else. The Galactic Council updated their files on humanity. The new file was much shorter than the old one. It said, essentially, treat them as neighbors, respect their space, and if you ever find yourself across a table from one of them in a crisis, remember Caro Venn's note in the margin of his report. The note said, they were never the threat, they were always the offer. We just needed to stop arriving with weapons long enough to hear it. High Arbiter Unopeth read the note, set down the report, and looked out the long curved window of her office at the galaxy that was, for this moment, still in one piece. Good, she said quietly. Then she went to find out what they were having for lunch.